hours, the judge is expected to rule on the mask mandate in Leon County. If you lose, will you accept that decision, or will you continue to fight?
Oh no, obviously, yeah, we'd appeal. We have our Attorney General here. Maybe she would want to weigh in on the legal component of it. But yeah, no, we think, yeah. So, and obviously, if we win in district court, I'm sure it'll be, or in trial court, I'm sure it'll be appealed on the other side too. And so that's good. I mean, I think, we obviously need to have this stuff crystallized. We think, obviously, I'll let Ashley talk about, the law, but we feel that the legislature really made a big statement with their parental bill of rights, and that's an important piece of legislation. So go ahead.
I'm a parent of a young school-age child. In addition to being the Attorney General, I want to thank this governor who has said we have to protect the parents' ability to choose for their children under different circumstances. Many of these children have faced different health circumstances, and parents should be able to make that choice as they're sending their child off to school. And so, I think, and the governor is right, the appropriate way to challenge something that you disagree with is to do that in court. We think the law is clear, and I think far too often, especially these days, you have elected officials. Look, all of us are concerned with the health and safety of Floridians, of Americans. We're going to keep doing everything in our effort, in our powers, to make sure that we are protecting our citizens. But that does not give anyone the right to disregard the rule of law, and the governor is correct. If there is an argument with a law, it should be challenged in court. Otherwise, you cannot flagrantly disregard statutes and orders in violation of law. It's pretty clear. It's a tenet of what our country is built on.
Governor,
I have an idea.
Let me take it right here.
Do you have any idea how many victims could have been affected by these actions of the coalition?
We have 42 domestic violence centers across the state. The Florida Coalition of Domestic Violence was the entity that was to coordinate, ensure they were living up to standards, and then pass through money as needed to those organizations. The problem here is Tiffany Carr stacked that board that determined how that money was distributed with many people that were allegiant to her, that participated in this scheme to cover up this excessive compensation. And so there are certain things that went on to allow for this to happen that we have accounted for. We will make sure never happens again. But our action was so important, and why we brought it so quickly after the House investigation uncovered so much of this, was we needed to make sure there was no disruption of service to the centers, and that these centers could get that money that was intended for them to help aid victims, and that will be done through this bill.
Governor, you've been very passionate about your executive order on the mask mandate. Yesterday you mentioned additional consequences for districts that aren't obeying this, that are forcing kids to wear masks here in Orange County. It's starting next week. What are those additional consequences?
Well, I think you'll hear an announcement from the Board of Education about the first two districts. That'll happen very soon. And then I know there's parents who've had their rights taken away who are going to pursue legal action. I think you will see that in some areas. And look, that when you do a Bill of Rights type of piece of legislation, obviously there may be certain enforcement mechanisms that like the state would do, and maybe in this case with penalties. The penalties will be applied to the politicians who violated the law. There'll be no penalties applied to school children or teachers or any of that. In fact, if teachers just follow state law, they'll be protected for doing that. So that'll be, the penalties will be focused on the politicians. But when you have a Bill of Rights, if your individual right as a parent is violated, then you have the ability then to go in and seek vindication. They're obviously doing the opposite there in Tallahassee. They're trying to basically nullify the parent's Bill of Rights, but you can also do it from the other. And I would just note, it was a little bit, sometime in August of last year. Remember, we were being sued because we had the schools open, and we said parents need to have the ability to send their kid to school. We got sued. We did lose in the trial court, and then we won on appeal resoundingly, and kids were able to go and get an education. And so that was something that was very, very important. But I do think that this will be resolved one way or another. I think the appeal will happen relatively quickly, and then you're going to have individual parents, because think about it. This, in terms of health, there's parents whose kids have not done well wearing the masks all day. Obviously, kids with special needs have not done well. kids with autism, and then just kids who don't learn as well when they're not able, particularly the little kids, when they're not able to see some of the facial cues and being able to do some of that. And so it has taken a toll on kids throughout Florida. Now, not every parent maybe thinks that, but many do. And so, they, I think, want to be able to send their kid in the best environment possible, understanding that there are some real drawbacks depending on the student situation. So I do think you're going to see that, and I also think from an evidence-based perspective, in that Leon County, I mean, they were not able to produce any control studies to show that there was a meaningful difference. In fact, the CDC, when they did their big Georgia study, they buried the conclusion, but they were looking to see like what mitigation worked, and they basically acknowledged that there wasn't a statistical significant difference between forced mask and optional mask school districts in Georgia last year. I think the same is true, in Florida in terms of how that ended up working out. But just think about a kid who's already recovered from COVID. I mean, people have gotten it. Obviously, Delta is much further. It travels much quicker. So you have someone recovered, now they're in there, to have them wear a mask, if that's not something the parent wants, from a scientific basis, I think you'd be hard pressed to say that's going to have any effect, even if you think the cloth masks are doing a lot of to block the viral. This is somebody that has. There was a study just out of Israel showing again just how potent the immunity conferred from infection is. I mean, it does provide you protection. I know there's some that don't like to acknowledge it. That clearly is a scientific fact at this point. So I think that there's a lot of basis for parents to look and say, hey, my kid's got special needs. I have rights under this statute. I'm going to go in. Or my kid has immunity from a prior infection, documented by all these different studies. What possible basis does it serve to take my right away and to make them do it? So I think you're going to see a lot of that flushed out.
Governor, related to lawsuits in Tallahassee, a judge tomorrow also expected to rule about the unemployment, but the crisis a lot of people still have, they can't get through the DEO, claims are still stalled. I'm wondering if you can just give some insight on where the promised fixes are and where Dr. Scott.
So when you're looking at some of the claims, so most of the claims go through very quickly, fortunately. There's been a lot that's been done. Now, fortunately, we don't have nearly as many claims as we did a year and a half ago. But there are some claims where the employer will contest, where there's a need for verification. They go through that. It takes a little longer. They are working to try to get to deal with that. But here's the issue. There's been attempts of fraud on our unemployment system, $10–20 billion worth of attempts. We've stopped, Dane Eagle will give you the exact number, we've stopped at least 10, I think up to $20 billion in fraudulent claims. We had over $1 billion in just 1 month, I remember, in January. And so that's what's happening. The system has to protect against that. And so if there's things that are flagged, they've got to go down and do it. So they are working hard to do it, but just they are being, it's not just Florida, inundated with fraudulent claims. This has become a major cottage industry. I think we have done, the amount of fraud that's been paid out in Florida is much less than many other states, because I think we've taken it our responsibility to try to protect the taxpayers on this and not do it. So you're going to end up with, I think, hundreds of billions of dollars throughout the country in just fraudulent unemployment claims will have ended up being paid out. And so we'll see the court. I can tell you this, in terms of unemployment, there are jobs available in Florida. Obviously, we had an upheaval in the economy nationwide in March of 2020, April, and it was tough times. And we worked to get this system up and running. It was a struggle there for some time, put a lot of resources in to be able to handle that. But now we're in a situation, we have 400 to 500,000 job openings in the state of Florida. If you go around, almost everyone wants to hire in some way or some form. And so, the need to have elongated unemployment and all that is not where it was back then, because we have so many opportunities. And I think you're seeing that. I mean, some of these jobs, you're getting a signing bonus. You may be working at a fast food place or some of this other stuff because the need is so intense. There's some restaurants that are doing very well, but they have to close 1 or 2 days a week because they don't have enough folks to be able to work. So we're in a much different position. We obviously had almost 70,000 private sector jobs in July. And then we'll get the August numbers. But then September, because the extended window will end, I think you'll see even more folks. So I'm just confident there's people that want to hire you.